Hello VC, welcome to another edition of Pete's CD and LP World. Today I want to go over some recent pickups I've had in the last couple of weeks or so. So again, when I do these videos, I listen to all the albums first and then give a quick review about each one instead of just show them all the day I get them, etc. And let's get started. So first one is a band called Shoes, and this is their album Present Tense. I believe this is their first major label album. They had a independent album before this. I had not heard about this band until recently. Another video, somebody mentioned it. They were doing a video about power pop, I believe, and they mentioned them. So lo and behold, this past weekend, my sons and I went to a new flea market that opened up, and there were some vinyl vendors there. We had stopped by first. One of them was pretty pricey, but they had some good stuff. Then we found another guy who was selling all of his albums for $5 each, or 5 for $20, which would have been like $4 each. So went there with both my sons. My son that's 10, he's just started collecting records and CDs. He's into music. My younger son, who's 7, is just he still just listens to like whatever is on the radio or whatever. But anyway, I think we did get like 10 albums between us. This was one of them. It was brand new, sealed, never opened. So that was a pretty good deal. And it's pretty good. Kind of a cross between Cheap Trick, The Kinks, and maybe The Knack. So this came out in 1979. So it was right in that time period. So definitely in the wheelhouse of like late 70s, early 80s Kinks. And pretty good band. I could see why maybe they didn't hit it big. None of these songs really sings to me as like they would be like a big hit, but pretty good album nonetheless. Pretty good sounding album too, the way it was produced. So I looked it up. They have 2 more Elektra albums, and they had an independent one before this, which is probably hard to find. So I'll be on the lookout for more of them. Next one is from the band Angel. This was their final album, double live album called Live Without a Net. And it pretty much has all their big songs on it that you'd, expect. Might do a video about Angel in the future. It's kind of a unique band that they had such a big stage show and a lot of money thrown at them, but they never really hit it big. So I'll definitely review this. Not review. I'll have a video about Angel in the future. But I was just always curious. This one's called Live Without a Net, and I was always wondered if Van Halen had gotten the title of their home video after this one. But we'll see. Next one I got is MCA Compilation. Came out in 1971. And the cool thing about this is most of the bands on here only released 1 or 2 albums. And the reason I got this album was because of the band Chelsea. So if you don't know, Chelsea was a band that Peter Criss from Kiss was in before Kiss. He's the only one that had an album out previous to Kiss. They only had 1 album. I don't have it, but I believe it goes for like about $60 or so on eBay. So I saw this album in Salvation Army. I don't know if you've ever been to Salvation Army, but they have those big gray plastic bins when they get the new stuff in. Usually full of clothes and just junk. This was sitting right on top, along with a couple other polka albums. So my eyes lit up when I saw Chelsea, so I grabbed it. It was in pretty good condition. But also, there's a couple other pretty good bands on here. Wishbone Ash is probably the best known band that's on here. And there's 2 bands, American Eagle and Fanny Adams, that pretty good early 70s hard rock / psych. So I'd like to pick up those albums if I can find them anywhere. But definitely recommend this. Next album is another one I got. This was at Goodwill. Billy Joel Glasshouses. This is actually a white label promo. And again, surprised to find something like this in the middle of 100 polka and other crap. But apparently the white label promo for this album is fairly rare. My favorite Billy Joel album is The Nylon Curtain. I'm not a huge Billy Joel fan. I think a lot of his music has not aged well. Especially like the lounge singer, ballady type songs from the 70s. This does have my favorite song from him, Sometimes a Fantasy. This was his attempt to be more rock, new wave. And it's a pretty good album overall. But, for $1, you can't beat that. Next one is Richard Marx, self-titled debut. Yeah, I know this is kind of like a middle-of-the-road cheesy pop album, but I always liked a lot of his songs and thought he was a talented songwriter and singer. A lot of hits on here, Should Have Known Better, Don't Mean Nothing, Endless Summer Nights, Hold On to the Nights. Definitely some butt slappers on here as far as ballads, but overall it's a good album. The only thing I don't like is I counted 2 or 3 songs maybe that he had like a real drummer on it. The rest of it was drum machines. And on the vinyl you really hear that even more than say the CD or MTV. But I think it was definitely unique hearing this on vinyl because before this most people probably only heard these songs either on listening to through your TV or on the radio or even maybe the CD or cassette at the time. But overall, it's a pretty good album. It has a lot of guys from the Eagles play on here, on separate songs. Joe Walsh, Randy Meisner, and I think Timothy B. Schmidt sing some backup, play some guitar on here. But, pretty good album. Next up is Cheap Trick in Color. I believe this is a first pressing because it has the orange Epic label. When we were at the flea market with my son, he picked up Dream Police, and then I found this one. So he was like, he doesn't have Dream Police, so he wanted that one. I was like, well, I'll take In Color because I don't have it on vinyl. But no explanation needed on this one. Pretty much every song is a well-known song. Every song on here was on either at Budokan or Budokan 2. So this was pretty much their entire live repertoire at that time. But even better sounding album on vinyl. Next up is a band called The Babies. So if you haven't heard of them, they were a late 70s, early 80s power pop / almost hard rock band. Believe they broke up in 1981. So this is their, I believe, second to last album. And you'll recognize John Waite as the singer. And Jonathan Cain who moved on to Journey after this. I believe this is his first album with them. He played on their last 2. The big hit or semi-hit on here is Back on My Feet Again. And the other song that's probably well known is Midnight Rendezvous, which I had known that song, but I just never knew it was The Babies. They're pretty good, middle-of-the-road hard rock. I could see them being big regionally in places. Don't think they ever completely took off. They had another big song called Isn't It Time, I think. That maybe on an earlier album than this. But, overall it's a pretty good sounding album. I've never been a big fan of John Waite as a vocalist, even when he went on to Bad English with Jonathan Cain and Neil Schon from Journey. But overall, it's a pretty good album. Next up is Nick Lowe. This is called Nick the Knife, sorry. I had one of the Rockpile albums that he was on, so I didn't know much about him. Kind of power pop, but very, very English sounding. Overall, it's a pretty good album, though. Pretty consistent Every song on here is pretty good. I think he was known for being more rockabilly, but on here it's not too much rockabilly. I would say it's more power pop and sort of that early 80s English pop. But, you know, again, pretty good album. Next up is an album from Andy Summers and Robert Fripp. This is called Bewitched. This is an all-instrumental album from them. It came out in 1984. I was not aware of this album at all until I saw this at Goodwill. Again, amazing. An album like this is sitting there in between a bunch of Barry Manilow and Polka and Barbra Streisand, but for $1 I figure I'd pick it up. Pretty much what you would expect from an instrumental album from 1984. I wouldn't say it's avant-garde. It's hard to describe it, really. The only I could say about it maybe is albums from movies from the 80s, sort of that background music. Definitely sounds sort of like this. Nothing really memorable except the first song, Parade, which is pretty good. It's a cool album to have, I guess, on in the background if you're just making dinner or just doing work. You know, I guess there was a whole genre of music like this in the 80s. Instrumental music that wasn't really jazz, wasn't really pop, wasn't really rock, sort of in between, a mix of all of them. But, you know, it was worth $1, you know. I'll probably listen to it again just to get a grasp of it, but it's definitely not out there like some of King Crimson is that Robert Fripp is from, but cool listen nonetheless. Another one is Grand Funk, Closer to Home. I actually didn't own any Grand Funk before this. I was aware of all of their hits. But I've heard so many people talk about them, how they're one of the earlier sort of proto-metal bands or hard rock bands of the early 70s. You know, side one is completely awesome. The well-known song from this album is obviously I'm Your Captain. I was not aware of any of the other songs on this, but yeah, I love all the other songs. Really good, heavy album. The thing about this album is the drums and bass on this album sound awesome, especially on vinyl. They just come alive when you hear this. So definitely looking forward to picking up some more of their stuff. And final album I have is Frank Zappa, Overnight Sensation. I used to have this album on cassette back in the 80s, early 90s. I had a lot of Frank Zappa on cassette, so I had gotten rid of those at one point. So I'm starting to get some of them back on vinyl. Actually, my friend gave me this. I have one friend who's really into vinyl and collects just like me. So one day he was like, text me all the stuff you're looking for or whatever. So I gave him a list, and I probably put like either any Frank Zappa or 70s Frank Zappa or whatever. And he's like, oh, I have Overnight Sensation if you want it. I don't really like it. I'm like, yeah. You know, I've seen his collection. I guess he just didn't have it in there. But I don't know what else to say besides, you know, if you love Frank Zappa, it's awesome. I like all eras of Frank Zappa, but particularly, I would say like 69 through 79. Hot Rats through like Shake Your Booty is kind of my era. My favorite album from his is One Size Fits All. This album has another, almost the same lineup. A lot of hits on here. I'm the Slime, Dirty Love, Zombie Wolf, Dynamo Hum, Montana. I believe this was his first gold album. It was either this or Apostrophe. Those albums, I'm not sure which one came out first. But definitely one of his more popular albums, and really great album. Sounds good on vinyl, obviously. Anyway, thanks for watching, and should have a couple more videos up maybe next week, and have a good weekend.